When Stephen Curry, the man who changed the game of basketball, discovered his own brother Seth, a phenomenal shooter in his own right, was facing eviction and working 3 jobs just to survive, he knew he had to act. But Seth's fierce pride, forged in the shadow of a superstar sibling, meant any direct offer of help would be met with a swift, firm rejection. What happened next became a masterclass in compassion, a testament to a bond deeper than basketball. The Golden State Warriors legend orchestrated a secret, intricate plan that would not only save his brother from the brink, but would also ignite a quiet revolution of kindness, transforming an entire community and proving that the most important assists in life happen far from the roar of the crowd. This is the untold story of how one quiet act of brotherly love sparked a nationwide movement, a story of 2 brothers, 1 game, and the enduring power of family. Stephen Curry guided his silver Porsche Taycan through the winding, tree-lined streets of Atherton, the late afternoon California sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. The October air was crisp, a welcome change from the stuffy confines of the Chase Center offices where he'd spent the day, 7:15 p.m. Another long day of meetings, brand strategy sessions, and foundation work was finally over. As he stepped out of the car, the familiar scent of eucalyptus filling the air, his phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed a name he hadn't seen in years, Jamal Henderson. "Jamal? Man, is that really you?" Stephen answered, a smile spreading across his face as he leaned against the car. He hadn't heard from his old high school teammate from Charlotte Christian School in what felt like a lifetime. "Steph, my guy. Yeah, it's me." The voice on the other end was warm but carried a hesitant undertone. "Listen, I know this is out of the blue. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important." Stephen's smile faded slightly. He stood up straight, a familiar sense of concern prickling at the back of his neck. Something in Jamal's tone, a careful weighing of words, set him on edge. "What's going on, man? Everything good?" "It's about Seth," Jamal said, and the name hung in the air between them. Stephen's grip on his phone tightened instinctively. He walked towards the grand entrance of his modern, glass-walled mansion, his footsteps echoing slightly in the quiet evening. "Seth? Is he okay? Did something happen?" He's alive and healthy, if that's what you mean," Jamal clarified, then cleared his throat. The sound was staticky over the phone. "I run a little sports memorabilia shop down in Sacramento now. You know, cards, jerseys, that kind of thing. Seth came in today. And Steph, man, I think he's in real trouble." Stephen stopped, his hand hovering over the biometric scanner at his front door. The cool evening air suddenly felt heavy, charged with unspoken anxiety. He sat down on the polished concrete steps of his porch. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial trouble, bad." Jamal's voice dropped, becoming more conspiratorial. He was trying to sell some of his old college stuff, a signed jersey from his Liberty days, his Duke warm-up suit. He was haggling over $100, man. He had this look on his face, like he was desperate. Stephen's chest tightened. Seth had always been the proudest, most self-reliant person he knew. Too proud. Too stubborn to ever ask for help, especially from his family, and most especially from his older brother, the 4-time NBA champion. "Did you talk to him?" Stephen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Tried to. Offered him way more than the stuff was worth, just to help him out. But you know Seth. He got all defensive, said he was just clearing out some old clutter. But Steph, when he was pulling his wallet out to show me his ID, something fell out, an eviction notice." "What?" Stephen shot up from the steps, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Are you sure?" "I picked it up after he left. It's from some apartment complex on the outskirts of Sac, the Riverbend Lofts. Says he's 3 months behind on rent. They're giving him 2 weeks. Stephen ran a hand over his face, the familiar gesture of stress and disbelief. Riverbend Lofts? He'd never heard of it, but it didn't sound good. The last time they talked, really talked, was at their parents' anniversary party a few months ago. Seth had seemed fine. He'd been his usual self-cracking jokes, playing with his nieces and nephews, arguing about who was the better shooter. There had been no hint of trouble, no sign of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Steph, there's more," Jamal continued, his voice heavy with concern. "I did a little asking around. A buddy of mine works security at the Gone Center. He says Seth's been working there. Not playing, man. Working. He's on the overnight cleaning crew. And that's not all. He's been driving for Uber Eats on the weekends and refereeing high school games for cash." Stephen's mind spun, reeling back through the years, back to their childhood in Charlotte. Seth, just 2 years younger, his shadow on the basketball court their father, Dell, had built in their backyard. Seth, pushing him, challenging him, celebrating his successes even when he was facing his own disappointments. Seth, the one who had to fight for every opportunity, who carved his own path through the G League and overseas leagues to make it to the NBA, proving everyone wrong. Why hadn't he called? "You know why," Jamal said, as if reading his mind. "Remember when we were kids? Seth would rather shoot on a bent rim with a flat ball than use one of your new ones. Said he had to earn it his own way. Some things don't change." Stephen remembered. Seth had always been fiercely independent, determined to make his own name, to escape the long shadow cast by his older brother. Even when they were teammates on the Warriors for that brief magical playoff run, Seth had insisted on being his own man, not just Steph's brother. "Thanks for calling, Jamal. For real," Stephen said, his voice thick with a mixture of gratitude and dread. "I'll handle it." "Just be careful how you handle it," Jamal warned. "You know how he is. You push too hard, he'll disappear." After hanging up, Stephen stood in the growing darkness, the lights of his mansion twinkling behind him. The house suddenly felt too big, too opulent, too empty. Somewhere a few hours away, his brother, a man with the same pure shooting form that had made Stephen a global icon, was choosing between food and rent. While Stephen had a net worth that was difficult to comprehend, his own brother was fighting for survival. He went inside, bypassing the state-of-the-art kitchen and the sprawling living room, and headed straight for his office. The walls were a testament to his success: championship trophies, MVP awards, framed jerseys, photos with presidents and rock stars. But he wasn't interested in any of that. He opened a drawer in his desk and rummaged through a collection of personal keepsakes until he found it. It was a faded photograph from 1999. Two skinny kids in matching Charlotte Hornets jerseys, their father's team. Stephen, with a toothy grin, had his arm slung around a slightly shorter, more serious-looking Seth. They were holding a basketball between them, their shared passion, their shared dream. Stephen's smile was easy, confident. Seth's was more reserved, a look of intense focus in his young eyes, as if he was already calculating the odds, already preparing for the fight ahead. Stephen traced the outline of his brother's face with his finger. When had the distance between them grown so vast? Success had been a blessing, a dream come true, but it had also been a wedge. The constant travel, the demands of fame, the gravitational pull of his own family and career had made it easy to miss the subtle signs, to accept the easy answer that everything's fine. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Seth's contact. But Jamal's warning echoed in his ears. A direct confrontation would only push Seth further away. This required a different kind of play. Not a full-court press, but a subtle, off-ball screen. A perfectly executed backdoor cut. He opened his laptop and searched for Riverbend Lofts, Sacramento. The images that filled the screen made his stomach churn. Peeling paint, rusted balconies, reviews that mentioned mold, plumbing issues, and a non-responsive management company. This was where his brother, an NBA player, was living? He found the parent company mentioned in the reviews, Kowalski Property Management. A quick search revealed a string of lawsuits and tenant complaints. 3 months behind on rent would mean Seth owed at least $400, probably more with late fees and penalties. To Stephen, it was pocket change. He could wire the money in seconds and make the problem disappear. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that Seth would never forgive him. The same pride that fueled his relentless drive on the court, that made him a warrior who had overcome countless setbacks, would make him view such a handout as the ultimate insult. Stephen leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silent room. A plan began to form, a complex, multi-layered strategy. If Seth wouldn't take the help directly, Stephen would have to create a situation where help was the only logical outcome, a situation that preserved his brother's dignity while solving the underlying crisis. His phone buzzed again, a text from Jamal. Forgot to mention, saw his daughter, Callie, with him. She's a sweet kid. Her shoes had holes in them. Just thought you should know. That was it. The final straw. Stephen grabbed his car keys. The drive to Sacramento was just under 2 hours. He'd make it in 90 minutes. As he sped through the night, the Bay Bridge lights blurring into a stream of gold, his mind was a flood of memories. Seth, as a kid, refusing to leave the court until he'd made 10 three-pointers in a row, long after Stephen had gone inside. Seth, at Duke, fighting through injuries, his face a mask of grim determination. Seth, in the G League, riding buses to games in small towns, never giving up on the dream. Seth finally getting his shot, dropping 37 points on the Phoenix Suns, his face a mixture of joy and vindication. The dashboard clock read 10:45 p.m. when he reached the outskirts of Sacramento. He drove past the gleaming Golden One Center, a place where both he and Seth had created magic, and headed towards the address Jamal had given him. The Riverbend lofts looked even worse in person. Flickering streetlights cast long, ominous shadows on the cracked pavement. A group of men loitered on a nearby corner, their eyes tracking the silent, expensive Porsche as it glided past. Stephen parked across the street, killing the engine and sinking down in his seat. He looked up at the building. The lights were on in apartment 4B, Seth's apartment. Through the thin, grimy window, he could see a silhouette moving back and forth. Seth, still awake, probably pacing, worrying about the rent, about Callie, about tomorrow. Just then, a figure darted out of the shadows, quickly taped a piece of paper to the door of 4B, and hurried away. Stephen squinted in the darkness. Another notice? A final warning? Whatever it was, Stephen knew one thing for certain. His brother was in a fight for his life, whether he knew it or not. And Stephen Curry hadn't become the greatest shooter in history by backing down from a challenge. He started the car and drove towards the nearest hotel. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The first rays of dawn streamed through the generic curtains of the Sacramento Hyatt, but Stephen was already wide awake. He sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, an old, leather-bound photo album open on his lap. He'd driven back to the Bay Area in the middle of the night to retrieve it from his parents' house, a silent pilgrimage to the source of their shared history. He hadn't slept, his mind replaying the image of that figure, taping the notice to Seth's door, the image of his brother's silhouette pacing in the dim light. He turned to a page marked, Backyard Battles, 1998. There they were, two wiry kids on the meticulously maintained court their father, Dell, had installed at their Charlotte home. Dell, a respected NBA veteran himself, had taught them the fundamentals, but it was on this court that their individual styles, their very basketball souls, had been forged. In the photo, a 10-year-old Stephen was trying to shoot over the outstretched arm of an 8-year-old Seth. Even then, Seth's defensive stance was perfect, his eyes locked on the ball with an intensity that belied his age. "You're reaching, Steph," Seth's voice, high-pitched but firm, echoed in his memory. "Keep your elbow in. Follow through." Those endless summer afternoons and cool Carolina evenings had been their sanctuary and their battlefield. While other kids were inside playing video games, the Curry brothers were on the court, their father's voice a constant soundtrack. "No, look passes, don't pay the bills. Footwork first," Dell would shout from the porch. Stephen was the phenom, the one with the effortless grace and the seemingly limitless range. But Seth was the grinder, the technician. He didn't have Stephen's flashy handles, but his shooting form was just as pure, a mirror image of his brother's, honed through thousands of hours of relentless, solitary practice. He was the one who would stay out long after the sun had set, shooting under the single floodlight until their mother, Sonia, would finally have to drag him inside. When Stephen was getting scholarship offers from every major program in the country, Seth was being told he was too small, too slow, not a true point guard. It was a narrative that would follow him for years, a constant, grating reminder that he was being measured against a ghost, yet he never showed any resentment. He celebrated Stephen's success with genuine joy. When Stephen led Davidson on that miraculous Elite Eight run, Seth was his biggest fan. Watching every game, his face a nervous wreck, living and dying with every shot. But Stephen knew it ate at him. He saw it in the way Seth attacked his own workouts, the chip on his shoulder a visible, palpable thing. He chose to go to Liberty University, a smaller school, determined to prove he could lead a team on his own terms. And he did, breaking the Big South Conference scoring record for a freshman. Then he transferred to Duke, a basketball powerhouse, and had to sit out a year, practicing against future NBA stars, biding his time, sharpening his skills. Stephen turned the page. There was a photo of the whole family at Seth's Duke graduation. Seth, in his cap and gown, holding his degree. The smile on his face wasn't just one of happiness. It was one of triumph. He had done it his way. He had earned it. The hotel phone buzzed, startling him from his reverie. It was Jamal. "Steph, you there? I just saw him. He's heading to his morning gig. He's on the cleaning crew at the Gone Center, man. 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Shift, before he starts his other jobs." "The Gone Center?" Stephen asked, already pulling on a pair of jeans and a hoodie. "The arena?" "Yeah. The same place he used to drop 20 points without breaking a sweat. Now he's cleaning the damn floors." Stephen hung up and grabbed his keys. The irony was a punch to the gut. As he drove through the quiet streets of downtown Sacramento, more memories surfaced. Seth, after going undrafted, refusing to give up, playing in the G League for the Santa Cruz Warriors, then the Erie Bayhawks, a stint in Italy, a 10-day contract here, a summer league invitation there. He was a basketball nomad, a journeyman in search of a home, all while his older brother was rewriting the NBA record books. He parked across from the arena's employee entrance and watched. A few minutes later, he saw him. Seth, wearing a generic gray janitorial uniform, a pair of headphones over his ears, his face set in a grim mask of determination. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than Stephen remembered. Stephen's heart clenched. His brother, the man who could shoot the lights out of any gym in the world, was pushing a mop across the same floors where he had once competed at the highest level. It was a cruel, twisted joke. He noticed something else. Seth kept pausing to stretch his left knee, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. An old injury flaring up? Stephen made a mental note. After his shift, Seth emerged, changing out of his uniform and into a pair of worn-out sweats. He got into a beat-up 2012 Honda Civic with a spiderweb crack in the windshield and drove off. Stephen followed, keeping a safe distance. He watched as Seth stopped at a small, modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. An elderly woman came out to the porch, leaning heavily on a walker. Seth got out of the car and handed her a bag of groceries. They talked for a few minutes, Seth smiling and laughing, his entire demeanor changing. He hugged the woman before getting back in his car and leaving. "Still taking care of everyone but yourself, huh?" Stephen muttered, a mixture of pride and frustration welling up inside him. He tailed Seth to a local high school, where he spent the next 3 hours refereeing a girls' varsity basketball tournament. He was a good referee, decisive and patient with the young players. During a timeout, Stephen saw him talking to one of the girls, correcting her shooting form, his face animated with the passion of a natural-born teacher. During a break between games, Stephen watched as Seth sat in the bleachers, eating a single protein bar and scrolling through his phone. He was looking at pictures of his daughter Callie, a small, sad smile on his face. As the day wore on, Stephen's plan began to solidify. This wasn't just about paying Seth's back rent. That would be a temporary fix, a band-aid on a gaping wound. This was about restoring his brother's dignity, his purpose. He couldn't just give Seth a check. Seth would tear it up. He couldn't offer him a cushy job in his business empire. The charity would be too obvious. It had to be something else. It had to be something that felt earned, something that honored the man Seth was, not just the man Stephen wanted him to be. That evening, back in his hotel room, Stephen spread out a series of documents on the large desk: property records, business licenses, reports on local community organizations. He made a series of discreet calls to his lawyer, his accountant, and a few trusted friends in the Sacramento area. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother, Sonia. She'd attached a photo. "Found this going through your father's old things. Thought you should see it." Stephen opened the image. It was a letter, handwritten on elegant stationery, in his mother's distinctive, flowing script. It was dated shortly after Seth had gone undrafted. "My dearest Stephen, I know you are worried about your brother. I see it in your eyes. He is so proud, so determined to make his own way. He will never ask for your help, Stephen. He is too much like your father in that way. But you must watch over him, not as a safety net, but as a silent guardian. The world will be hard on him. It will compare him to you, and that is a burden no one should have to bear. But his spirit is strong. Your job is not to clear the path for him, but to make sure he has the strength to clear it for himself. Take care of your brother. He took care of you on that backyard court more times than you'll ever know. Love, Mom." Stephen stared at the letter, tears blurring his vision. His mother had seen it all, years in advance. She had known this day might come. He wiped his eyes and looked at the plan taking shape on the desk in front of him. His mother's words had given him clarity, had affirmed his instincts. Tomorrow, he would set it all in motion. Seth had spent his life fighting for his own shot. It was time someone created the perfect assist. A sharp knock on the hotel room door interrupted his thoughts. Stephen opened it to find a courier holding a sleek, black envelope. "Urgent delivery for Mr. S. Curry," the courier said, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized the famous face. Stephen signed for it and tore open the envelope. Inside was a professionally printed notice from Kowalski Property Management. It was a formal final eviction notice for Seth Curry, resident of apartment 4B. But there was something else. It was also a notice to all tenants of the Riverbend Lofts. The building had been sold to a developer, and all residents had 30 days to vacate the premises. The building was scheduled for demolition to make way for a new luxury condominium complex. Stephen crumpled the paper in his fist. 30 days. He had 30 days to save not just his brother, but an entire community of vulnerable tenants. The game had just gotten bigger. Stephen was up before the sun, a man on a mission. He barely slept, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and logistics. He dressed in nondescript clothing, a gray hoodie, a pair of jeans, a generic baseball cap, and sunglasses. Today, he was not Stephen Curry, the global icon. He was just a concerned brother. He drove to the Riverbend Lofts and parked a block away, the engine silent. The morning was cold, a thick fog rolling in from the Sacramento River, shrouding the dilapidated building in a ghostly mist. He pulled his cap lower and waited. At 5:45 a.m., Seth emerged from the building, a worn gym bag slung over his shoulder. He walked with a slight limp, a ghost of an old injury that Stephen hadn't noticed the day before. Stephen followed at a safe distance, his heart aching with every step his brother took. He watched as Seth headed towards the Gone Center for his cleaning shift, but he didn't go straight inside. He stopped at a small, struggling community garden wedged between the arena and a parking garage. An elderly man was trying to hoist a heavy bag of mulch, his back bent with effort. "Morning, Mr. Chen," Seth called out, his voice warm and friendly. "Let me get that for you." "Seth, my boy, you are too kind," the old man replied, his face breaking into a grateful smile. "But you have work. You will be late." "Work can wait 5 minutes," Seth said, easily lifting the heavy bag despite his own obvious fatigue. "Where do you want this?" Stephen watched from his car as his brother spent the next 15 minutes helping Mr. Chen spread mulch and weed a flower bed, his movements efficient and careful. He was making himself late for a job he desperately needed, all to help a neighbor. That was Seth, always putting others first, even when he was drowning. After Seth finally went inside the arena, Stephen got out of his car and approached Mr. Chen. "Excuse me, sir," he said, keeping his voice low and his face partially hidden by the cap. "I couldn't help but notice you know that young man, Seth." Mr. Chen beamed. "Everyone knows Seth. Best man in this neighborhood. Helps me with this garden every week. Never takes a dime. Says flowers make people happy, and happy people make better communities." "Does he ever talk about his own troubles?" Stephen asked, his tone casual. The old man's smile faded. "Seth does not complain, but I have eyes. I see him working 3 jobs. I see him wearing the same worn-out basketball shoes for 2 years. His little girl, Callie, she needs braces. Seth has been saving for months, but then his car broke down again. That boy has more pride than a king." He shook his head slowly. "Pride is a funny thing. It can build a man up, and it can tear him down in silence." Stephen thanked him and walked back to his car, his mind racing. Braces for Callie, car repairs, the eviction. The debts were piling up, a relentless tide threatening to pull his brother under. He spent the rest of the morning shadowing Seth's grueling routine. After the cleaning shift, Seth rushed to the high school for the second day of the refereeing gig. During a long break, instead of resting, he was in the gym, giving a free shooting clinic to a group of kids from a local youth center. "It's all in the wrist," Stephen overheard him telling a young boy who was struggling with his form. "Don't think about the shot. Just feel it. Let it flow." The boy, no older than 12, looked up at him with wide, adoring eyes. "Are you famous, mister? You shoot like my dad's favorite player, Stephen Curry." Seth smiled, a sad, gentle expression. "No, son, I'm not famous. I'm just a guy who loves the game. Now, let's see that follow-through again." Stephen felt a lump form in his throat. In another life, with a few different breaks, Seth could have been a renowned coach, a sought-after shooting guru. Instead, he was here, in a dusty high school gym, giving away his knowledge for free, his own dreams deferred. After the tournament, Seth picked up Callie from a friend's house. Stephen watched from a distance as father and daughter walked hand in hand towards their apartment, Callie chattering away, her bright, happy voice a stark contrast to the grim reality of their situation. They stopped at a thrift store, and through the window, Stephen saw Callie pointing excitedly at a brightly colored jacket. He saw Seth check the price tag, then count the crumpled bills in his wallet. He saw the slow, heartbreaking shake of his brother's head. He saw Callie, with a maturity beyond her years, hug her father and say something that made Seth quickly wipe his eyes. Later that evening, Seth left for his third job, an overnight security shift at a warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city. Stephen followed him to the desolate, poorly lit district. For 6 hours, Seth walked the perimeter of a massive, silent building, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a two-way radio. During his 2 a.m. break, Seth sat on a loading dock crate and pulled out his phone. Stephen crept closer, hiding in the shadows between 2 large shipping containers. He could hear his brother's voice, low and tired, leaving a voicemail. "Hey, Steph, it's Seth. Just, calling to say hi. Been a while. Everything's good here. Callie's doing great in school, getting so big. Hope you and the family are well. Warriors are looking good for another run. Anyway, just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you get a chance. Love you, man." Stephen checked his own phone. He had a dozen missed calls from Seth over the past few months. He'd been so consumed by his own world, the team, his businesses, his family, that he'd let them all go to voicemail, always meaning to call back, always getting distracted. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest. Around 3 a.m., as Seth was making his final rounds, a sleek black sedan pulled up. 2 large, imposing men got out. Stephen tensed, his body coiled, ready to intervene. But Seth seemed to know them. "Curry, we need to talk," the larger of the 2 men said, his voice a low growl. "Mr. Kowalski is getting impatient." "I told him I'd have the money by the end of the month," Seth replied, his voice calm and steady, betraying none of the fear he must have been feeling. "That was last month," the man said, stepping closer. "The interest is piling up. You're into him for 10 grand now." Stephen's blood ran cold. $10,000? Who was Kowalski? "I'm working on it," Seth said, standing his ground. "I just need a little more time." The man laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Time is running out. Mr. Kowalski likes you, says you're an honorable man. But business is business. Pay up, or things get unpleasant." After they left, Seth stood there for a long time, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He looked small and defeated under the harsh glare of the security lights. Stephen wanted to run to him, to wrap him in a hug, to tell him it was all going to be okay. But he knew it would be the worst thing he could do. Seth's pride was all he had left. Taking that away would be a fatal blow. As Seth finally walked back towards his car, Stephen noticed a small, crumpled piece of paper fall from his pocket. He waited until Seth had driven away before retrieving it from the dusty ground. He smoothed it out under the dim light of a street lamp. It was a pawn shop receipt. Seth had pawned his 2015 NBA championship ring, the one he had earned as a member of the Warriors. The ring he had been so proud of, a symbol that he, too, had reached the pinnacle of the sport. At the bottom of the receipt, a handwritten note. Final warning. Account in default. Legal action pending. Stephen clutched the paper, his knuckles white. Rage, hot and fierce, battled with a profound, soul-crushing sorrow. His brother, a champion, was selling his most treasured possessions to keep his head above water, all while pretending to the world, and to his own family, that everything was fine. The pride that had made Seth a fighter, a survivor, a man of principle, was now destroying him. And Stephen realized, in that dark, desolate moment, that saving his brother would require more than just money. It would require a miracle. As dawn approached, Stephen drove back to his hotel, a new, steely resolve settling over him. He had seen enough. Tomorrow, he would unleash his plan. But first, he had one more person to see, someone who held the key to helping Seth without shattering his pride. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Coach Kerr? It's Steph. I need your help." "Stephen, it's 5 a.m. Is everything okay?" Steve Kerr's voice was thick with sleep, but instantly alert. The bond between the coach and his star player transcended basketball. "Yes, coach. I'm sorry to call so early," Stephen said, pacing the length of his hotel room like a caged tiger. "I need your help with something delicate." "What's going on, son?" Stephen took a deep breath. "It's Seth. He's in trouble, and I need to help him without him knowing it's me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tell me everything." For the next 20 minutes, Stephen laid it all out. The eviction notice, the 3 jobs, the pawn championship ring, the debt to a man named Kowalski. Coach Kerr listened patiently, his silence a comforting presence. "Seth was always the proud one," Kerr said finally, his voice filled with a deep understanding. "Even when he was with us in Santa Cruz, he never wanted any special treatment. Insisted on earning every single minute. That's the problem, coach. He'd rather lose everything than accept a handout from me." "Then we don't offer him a handout," Kerr said, his voice taking on the familiar, strategic tone he used during timeouts. "We create an opportunity so perfect for him, so aligned with his skills and his passion, that turning it down would be illogical. Let me make some calls." After hanging up, Stephen immediately dialed his longtime agent and business manager, Jeff Austin. "Jeff, I need you to do a deep dive on someone. Quietly. Very quietly." "Who are we talking about, Steph?" "My brother, Seth. And I need to know everything there is to know about a property developer in Sacramento named Victor Kowalski." While Jeff's team started digging, Stephen decided to visit the high school where he'd seen Seth refereeing. He'd heard that Seth also volunteered there, coaching the boys' junior varsity team. He found the athletic director, a woman named Maria Flores, in her cluttered office. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up from a pile of paperwork. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "Oh my God, you're—" "Just a concerned family member," Stephen said quickly, giving her a charming, disarming smile. "I heard my brother, Seth Curry, volunteers here." Coach Flores's face lit up. "Seth He's a godsend. Volunteers 20 hours a week. Never asks for a penny. The kids absolutely adore him. He's the best coach we've ever had. Does he ever mention any problems? She hesitated, her expression clouding over. Seth doesn't complain, but I offered to pay him a small stipend last month just to show our appreciation. He turned it down flat. Said the school needed the money more than he did. She paused, chewing on her lip. Though I did see him limping the other day. I think his old knee injury is acting up again. And he looks tired, really tired. The kids really like him? Stephen prodded gently. Like him? They worship him. Half these boys come from single-parent homes. They don't have positive male role models. Seth fills that void. He teaches them about more than just basketball. He teaches them about character, about discipline, about pride. Pride. There was that word again. A double-edged sword. Stephen's phone buzzed. It was Jeff. Steph, I've got the information, Jeff said, his voice grim. Seth is in deeper than we thought. He's maxed out 3 credit cards. He has outstanding medical bills from a knee scope he had last year. He refused physical therapy because he couldn't afford to take the time off work. What about Kowalski? Stephen's jaw was clenched. Victor Kowalski. He's not just a developer. He runs a private lending company on the side. It's essentially a loan sharking operation with a legitimate facade. Seth borrowed $5,000 8 months ago to cover Callie's medical expenses. With the exorbitant interest rates, the debt has ballooned to over $10,000. What else? Seth has been covering the prescription costs for his elderly neighbor, a Mrs. Elena Rodriguez. She's on a fixed income and can't afford her heart medication. He's been paying for it out of his own pocket for over a year. Of course he has, Stephen thought. That's just who he is. There's more, Jeff continued, his voice tight with anger. Seth has been selling his plasma twice a week for extra cash. And he's scheduled to start a 4th job next week, overnight shifts at a bottling plant. If he takes that on, he'll be working nearly 20 hours a day. He's going to run himself into the ground. He'll kill himself, Stephen whispered, closing his eyes. That's not all. The IRS has placed a lien on his bank account for unpaid taxes from a few years ago, and Callie's school has sent multiple notices about overdue lunch fees. How had it gotten this bad? How had he been so blind? Jeff, Stephen said, his voice now cold and clear as ice. I need you to set up a shell corporation, a foundation, something that can't be traced back to me in any way. What are you planning, Steph? I'm going to buy a building, and I'm going to create a job that my brother can't refuse. After hanging up, Stephen drove back to the Riverbend lofts. He found the building manager, a harried-looking woman named Mrs. Henderson, in a small, cramped office in the basement. Mrs. Henderson? He asked, pulling his cap down further. I represent an investment group that is interested in this property. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Already sold it. Kowalski Development bought the whole block. The deal closes next week. Stephen's stomach dropped. Kowalski didn't just hold his brother's debt, he owned his home. This was more complicated than he had imagined. What if my group were to offer you double what Kowalski paid? Stephen asked. A desperate gambit. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. The contract is signed. Besides, Mr. Kowalski is not a man you want to cross. He has connections. Stephen left, frustrated but more determined than ever. He immediately called Coach Kerr. Coach, it's worse than I thought. Kowalski owns Seth's building. He's the loan shark my brother owes money to. Kerr whistled low on the other end. That's a tangled web. We need to be smart about this. I have an idea, but I'll need your help to make it look legitimate. That evening, Stephen convened a secret meeting in his hotel suite. He brought in 3 people, Jamal Henderson, his old friend from the memorabilia shop, Coach Maria Flores, the athletic director from the high school, and Pastor Dave Roberts, the head of a local church that Seth and Callie sometimes attended. He swore them all to secrecy. We are going to create a community sports initiative, Stephen explained, his voice filled with a newfound authority. A nonprofit organization that needs a dedicated, passionate director. The salary will be enough to cover all of Seth's debts and provide a stable future for him and Callie. But how do we get him to take the job? Jamal asked, his brow furrowed with skepticism. He'll know it's a setup. We make it look like it's coming from the city, Stephen said. Coach Kerr has connections with the mayor's office. They're going to announce a new public-private partnership aimed at reducing youth crime through sports. Pastor Roberts nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. And Seth is the perfect candidate. His background, his coaching experience, his reputation in the community, it's a natural fit. Exactly, Stephen said. But there's one major problem, Victor Kowalski. He won't let Seth go that easily. He enjoys having people under his thumb. Leave Kowalski to me, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there, leaning against the doorframe, was Draymond Green. Heard you were in town and needed some help with a delicate negotiation, Draymond said with a grin, stepping into the room. Kowalski and I have some mutual friends. Let's just say he owes me a favor. For the first time in days, Stephen felt a genuine surge of hope. The pieces of his audacious plan were finally falling into place. Late that night, alone in his hotel room, Stephen made one last crucial call. Callie, he said, his voice soft, when his niece answered the phone. Uncle Steph? Is that you? Yeah, sweetie. Is your dad there? He's at work. He's always at work, she said, her voice small and sad. Callie, I need you to do something for me, but it has to be our little secret, okay? Okay. In your dad's closet, on the top shelf, there's an old shoebox. Inside that box, there's a letter from your grandma Sonia. Can you find it for me? He heard some rustling, the sound of a chair being dragged across the floor. A few moments later, she was back. I found it. It says, for Stephen, on the envelope. Stephen's heart raced. Don't open it, sweetie. Just put it back. And Callie, everything is going to be okay. I promise. After hanging up, Stephen stared out the window at the glittering lights of the Sacramento skyline. His mother's letter was the final piece of the puzzle. She had known this day would come. Tomorrow, he would have to confront Victor Kowalski, and that would require playing a very dangerous game. The next morning, the conference room at the Sacramento Hilton was a hive of quiet, intense activity. Stephen stood at the head of the table, flanked by his hand-picked team. Coach Kerr was there, looking every bit the seasoned strategist. Draymond Green was leaning back in his chair, an air of confident nonchalance about him. Jeff Austin was on a large video screen, his face a mask of professional focus. Here's the situation, Stephen began, spreading a series of architectural plans and financial reports across the polished mahogany table. Kowalski owns 12 properties in this downtown district, including the Riverbend Lofts. His plan is to demolish them all and build a luxury high-rise. He's displacing over 200 families. Draymond leaned forward, his eyes sharp. I've known guys like Victor my whole life. He came to this country with nothing, clawed his way to the top. He's ruthless, but he understands power. He respects strength. What kind of strength? Coach Kerr asked. Money, influence, celebrity, Draymond said, looking directly at Stephen. He's a massive basketball fan. Has a signed jersey of yours hanging in his office. Stephen nodded slowly. We can use that. But first, let's talk about the foundation. Jeff's voice filled the room from the speakers. I've set up the shell company. It's called the Northern California Youth Sports and Education Foundation, registered in Delaware. No legal ties to you whatsoever, Steph. Good. Now, Coach Kerr, what did the mayor's office say? Kerr smiled, a rare, full-faced grin. Mayor Johnson loves the idea. Sacramento has been struggling with youth engagement. A state-of-the-art sports and education center, run by a respected figure like Seth Curry, it's a political win for him. They're willing to fast-track the permits and even offer up the old abandoned warehouse on R Street for the project. That's in Kowalski's territory, Draymond pointed out. Exactly, Stephen said, a glint in his eye. We're going to make him an offer he can't refuse. He outlined the next phase of the plan. The foundation would approach Kowalski with a proposal to buy not just the Riverbend Lofts, but 3 of his other dilapidated residential buildings on the same block. They would offer him 20% above market value, a deal sweet enough to get his attention without raising suspicion. But here's the key, Stephen continued, his voice dropping. The offer will have a non-negotiable clause. All current tenants must be given the first option to lease apartments in the newly renovated buildings, at their current rental rates, locked in for 5 years. He'll never go for it, Draymond said, shaking his head. His entire business model is based on gentrification. He will, Stephen said, if the right people ask. He picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. Commissioner Silver? It's Stephen Curry. I need a favor. 20 minutes later, the NBA commissioner had agreed to lend his considerable influence to the cause. He would place a call to Kowalski, casually mentioning that the league was looking to partner with developers on community-focused projects in NBA cities. A successful, high-profile project in Sacramento, endorsed by the league and its biggest star, could be a model for the entire country. Kowalski will eat that up with a spoon, Draymond said, laughing. He's always craved legitimacy. With the property deal in motion, Stephen turned his attention to the job offer itself. We need to craft the director position so perfectly for Seth that it feels like destiny. They spent the next hour meticulously writing the job description, Director of Community Athletics and Youth Development. The salary was set at $125,000, plus full benefits and a housing stipend. The requirements were a mirror image of Seth's life: professional basketball experience, extensive coaching background, deep ties to the Northern California community, a degree in a relevant field. It was Seth Curry in everything but name. What about the interview process? Coach Kerr asked. Seth is smart. He'll smell a setup if it's not completely legitimate. We make it real, Stephen said. We'll have a full interview panel with 3 other highly qualified, but ultimately not as perfect, candidates. And we'll stack the panel with people who already know and respect Seth's work. He looked at Coach Flores and Pastor Roberts, who had just joined the meeting. They both nodded in agreement. As the meeting wrapped up, Stephen's phone buzzed. An unknown number. Mr. Curry? A heavily accented voice said. This is Victor Kowalski. I understand you have a foundation that is interested in some of my properties. Stephen's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his voice cool and steady. Mr. Kowalski, yes, my foundation is looking to make a significant investment in the Sacramento community. So I hear. Commissioner Silver speaks very highly of your vision. Perhaps we should meet. I'd like that. Tonight, my office, 8 p.m. And Mr. Curry, come alone. The line went dead. Draymond grabbed Stephen's arm. Don't go, man. It's a trap. He's testing you. I have to, Stephen said, his jaw set. This is for Seth. That evening, Stephen dressed for battle. He wore an impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit, a Patek Philippe watch, and shoes that cost more than a month's rent at the Riverbend lofts. He was projecting an aura of untouchable success and power. He arrived at Kowalski's penthouse office, a sprawling, opulent space overlooking the city. Kowalski was not what he had expected. He was a man in his late 60s with a shock of silver hair, an elegant European suit, and the refined air of an aristocrat. He looked more like a symphony conductor than a loan shark. Mr. Curry, Kowalski said, his smile not quite reaching his cold, calculating eyes. He shook Stephen's hand, his grip surprisingly firm. I am honored. Please, have a seat. The office was a shrine to basketball. Signed jerseys from legends lined the walls. The promised poster of Stephen mid-jump shot hung in a place of prominence behind the massive oak desk. I understand you want to buy some of my buildings, Kowalski said, pouring 2 glasses of what looked like very expensive scotch. My foundation is interested in community development, Stephen replied, his voice a carefully modulated baritone. Kowalski studied him for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. And this has nothing to do with the fact that your brother, Seth, owes me a significant amount of money? Stephen froze, his carefully constructed composure momentarily shattered. Kowalski knew. Kowalski waved a dismissive hand. Relax, Mr. Curry. I'm a businessman. I make it my business to know things. Did you really think I wouldn't notice Stephen Curry? the two-time MVP, skulking around my properties in a hoodie and sunglasses. Then you know why I'm here. I do. And I respect it. Family is everything. Kowalski took a slow sip of his scotch. Your brother is a good man. A proud man. Too proud, perhaps. He borrows money, not for himself, but to help others. The old woman's medicine, the teenager's basketball camp fees, the single mother's car repair. Stephen listened, stunned into silence by the man's detailed knowledge. I am a businessman, Mr. Curry, not a monster, Kowalski said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. I offered your brother very reasonable terms. He is the one who insisted on paying interest, on treating it like a formal loan, on preserving his dignity. Will you sell the buildings? Stephen asked, cutting to the chase. Kowalski smiled, a genuine, surprising smile this time. I will do better. I will sell you the properties at cost. I will forgive your brother's debt, and I will make a $1 million donation to your new community center. Stephen's eyes narrowed. What's the catch? No catch. Just a request. Kowalski pulled out a youth league basketball jersey. My grandson, Leo. He plays for the Jesuit high school Marauders. He thinks you are a god. If you could sign this, and perhaps, one day, visit his team for a practice. Stephen almost laughed out loud. The fearsome, ruthless Victor Kowalski just wanted an autograph for his grandson. Deal, Stephen said, taking the pen and signing the jersey. But I have one condition of my own. The job offered to my brother. It has to look completely, 100% legitimate. He can never know that I was involved. Agreed, Kowalski said, raising his glass. To family. To family, Stephen echoed, a wave of relief washing over him. As he drove back to the hotel, he felt lighter than he had in days. The biggest obstacle had been removed. Now came the hardest part, convincing Seth to accept the gift that had been so carefully wrapped for him. His phone rang. It was Callie, her voice frantic. Uncle Steph, something's wrong. Dad came home early from his security job. He's just sitting in the dark. He's holding some papers and he's crying. I've never seen my dad cry before. Stephen floored the accelerator. I'm on my way. As he raced through the streets of Sacramento, he realized the timeline had just been moved up. Whatever those papers were, they had pushed his proud, stoic brother to the breaking point. The game wasn't over. It was just entering the fourth quarter. Stephen's Porsche screeched to a halt in front of the Riverbend lofts. He vaulted up the concrete stairs, taking them two at a time, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Through the thin, flimsy door of apartment 4B, he could hear Callie's small, pleading voice. Dad, please talk to me. What's wrong? He pressed his ear to the door and heard a sound that shattered his heart, the broken, choked sob of his brother. I failed you, baby. I failed everyone. Unable to wait another second, Stephen knocked, his knuckles rapping sharply against the wood. Seth, it's me, Steph. Open up. The crying stopped. There was a long, tense silence, then the sound of shuffling footsteps. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a sliver of Seth's face, his eyes red and swollen, his cheeks stained with tears. Steph? What are you doing here? Let me in, Seth, please. Seth hesitated for a moment, then opened the door wider. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the flickering streetlights outside. On the small, rickety coffee table lay a stack of papers, foreclosure notices, final demands from credit card companies, and a letter from Callie's school threatening to suspend her for unpaid lunch fees. Callie, sweetie, Stephen said, his voice gentle, can you give your dad and me a minute? Callie looked from her father's devastated face to her uncle's concerned one. She hugged her father tightly, burying her face in his side, before retreating to her small bedroom and closing the door. Once she was gone, Seth collapsed onto the worn-out couch, his head in his hands. How did you know? He whispered, his voice hoarse. How did you know I was in trouble? Stephen sat down beside him on the lumpy cushion. Jamal called me. He told me about the eviction notice. Seth's hands clenched into fists on his knees. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know. Why, Seth, I'm your brother. Because you're Stephen Curry, Seth exploded, jumping to his feet and pacing the small, cramped living room. His voice was raw with years of pent-up frustration and pain. You're the best shooter on the planet. You're a global brand. You own a damn empire, and I'm nothing. I can't even keep a roof over my daughter's head. Don't say that, Stephen said firmly, standing up to face him. You are not nothing. You're the man who taught me how to compete. You're the toughest competitor I've ever known. Seth laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Taught you? Steph, you surpassed me before you could even grow a beard. I was supposed to be the one, remember? The gritty, tough one who made it. Instead, I'm cleaning toilets, while my little brother is a 4-time champion. Stephen grabbed his brother by the shoulders, his grip firm. Listen to me. You chose to fight through injuries that would have ended other players' careers. You chose to be a father, a great father. You chose to help every single person in this community before you even thought about helping yourself. That's not nothing, Seth. That's everything. Seth pulled away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Noble choices don't pay the bills, Steph. Tonight, they shut off our power. Tomorrow, we're on the street, and Callie, his voice broke, she deserves so much better. Then let me help you. No, Seth shouted, his voice echoing in the small apartment. I will not be your charity case. I will not be another one of your tax write-offs. Just then, Stephen's phone buzzed. It was a text from Draymond. Kowalski's on the move. Just delivered a package to the building manager. Big envelope. Stephen frowned. What was Kowalski up to? A knock on the door interrupted the tense standoff. Seth opened it to find Mrs. Henderson, the building manager, holding a large black envelope with the Kowalski Development logo embossed in gold. This just arrived for you, she said, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Seth's face went pale as he took the envelope. With trembling hands, he tore it open. Inside was a cashier's check for $25,000 and a single typewritten note. Debt forgiven. Good luck with the new position. V.K. What? What new position? Seth muttered, pulling out another document from the envelope. It was a formal job offer from the Northern California Youth Sports and Education Foundation. Position: Director of Community Athletics. Starting salary: $125,000. I don't understand, Seth said, his voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. I never even applied for this. Stephen peered over his shoulder, feigning surprise. Wow, looks legitimate. Says here they've been scouting you for months. They were impressed by your volunteer coaching and your work with the local youth. But the timing, it's too perfect. It's too convenient. Before Stephen could respond, Seth's phone rang. The caller ID read, Mayor Johnson. Seth answered, his hand shaking. Hello? Mr. Curry, this is Mayor Johnson. I'm calling to personally congratulate you on the new position. The City Council is absolutely thrilled to have a man of your caliber and character leading this new youth initiative. Can you start on Monday? Seth stammered, completely overwhelmed. I haven't even interviewed. No need, the mayor boomed cheerfully. The foundation's board voted unanimously. Your reputation in this community speaks for itself. We've been looking for someone like you for months. After hanging up, Seth stared at the phone, then at the check, then at his brother. His eyes narrowed, a spark of suspicion cutting through the fog of his confusion. You did this. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Stephen met his brother's gaze, his expression a carefully crafted mask of innocence. Seth, I've been in the Bay Area, running my businesses, getting ready for the season. How could I possibly have arranged all of this? Seth studied him for a long, silent moment, searching for any crack in his facade. Swear to me, Steph. Swear to me this isn't your money, your influence pulling the strings. Stephen chose his words with the precision of a surgeon. I swear that I did not personally pay off your debt or create this job out of thin air. Technically, it was the truth. The foundation and Kowalski had been the instruments of his plan. Seth's shoulders finally sagged. the fight going out of him. He looked at the job offer again. 125. 0 a year. Benefits. A housing allowance. He looked around the shabby, dark apartment, then at the closed door to his daughter's room. We could move. We could get a place in a safe neighborhood. Callie could have her own room. We could finally breathe. Sounds like a dream come true, Stephen said softly. It does, Seth said, wiping his eyes. But why me? There have to be dozens of more qualified people. Because you care, Stephen said, his voice filled with a genuine, unshakable conviction. Every kid in this city who has ever picked up a basketball knows you, respects you, looks up to you. You've been doing this job for free for years, Seth. It's about time someone started paying you for it. Seth walked to Callie's door and opened it gently. She was sitting on her bed, pretending to read a book, but her eyes were wide and she was clearly listening. Callie Bean, Seth said, his voice thick with emotion. Pack your things. We're moving. Callie shot up from the bed. Really, Dad? For real? Really. Your dad got a new job. A really good job. Callie flew into her father's arms, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Stephen saw his brother's face relax into a genuine, unburdened smile. He felt tears sting his own eyes. This was what it was all about, giving his brother back his pride, his purpose, his ability to be the hero in his own daughter's eyes. Later that night, after helping Seth and Callie pack their most essential belongings, Stephen stepped outside to make a call. It's done, he told Coach Kerr. He took the job. There's more, Kerr said, a note of amusement in his voice. Kowalski just called the mayor's office. He's not just selling the buildings to the foundation at cost. He's donating them. Says it's a goodwill gesture to the city. I think your little visit might have changed him. Stephen smiled. Sometimes, the toughest opponents could become your greatest allies. Back in the apartment, he found Seth standing on the small, rusted balcony, looking up at the stars. Remember what Dad used to say about the backyard court? Seth asked, his voice quiet. Every day, Stephen replied. He said it wasn't about basketball. It was about giving us a place where we could work hard for something to be proud of. Seth turned to face him, his expression serious. I think I lost that somewhere along the way, Steph. I got so focused on just surviving that I forgot how to live. You never lost it, Stephen said. You just gave it all away. To the kids you coached, to the neighbors you helped, to Callie. Now, it's your turn to receive. Seth nodded slowly. This job, it feels like destiny. Like everything I've been through, all the struggles, all the setbacks. It was all preparing me for this. If you only knew, Stephen thought. As they stood there in the comfortable silence, a bond reforged. Seth's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the new position. Your mother would be so proud. A friend. Seth showed the phone to Stephen, a look of confusion on his face. Who would send this? Stephen kept his face a perfect mask of neutrality, though he recognized Coach Kerr's handiwork. Someone who knows you deserve this, brother. Someone who knows you've earned it. The next morning, as Seth and Callie prepared to move into a temporary corporate apartment provided by the foundation, Stephen watched from his car across the street. His brother stood taller. His smile was wider. His movements filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Stephen's phone rang. It was his publicist in San Francisco. Steph, the media has somehow gotten wind of this new Sacramento Youth Center. They want to know if you're involved. Stephen glanced across the street at his brother, who was now laughing, chasing a giggling Callie around a stack of moving boxes. Tell them I know nothing about it, he said, a smile playing on his lips. This is a local Sacramento initiative. It's all about the community. But sir, if people knew what you did, they don't need to know. Some victories, the most important ones, are sweeter when they're silent. As he started the car and drove away, heading back to his own world of fame and fortune, he felt his mother's presence, a warm, comforting feeling. He had kept his promise. Seth would never know about the late-night meetings, the shell company, the carefully orchestrated plan. He would simply believe that sometimes, against all odds, Good things happen to good people. But as he reached the city limits, his phone buzzed with a text from Seth. Steph, wait, there's something you need to see. At Mom and Dad's old house. Meet me there in an hour. Stephen's heart skipped a beat. What had Seth discovered? Stephen drove down the familiar, tree-lined street in Charlotte, his palms sweating on the leather steering wheel. He'd taken a private jet, his mind racing the entire way. His parents' old house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, its stately brick facade, a monument to their shared childhood. The basketball court in the backyard, the stage for so many of their triumphs and tribulations, was still visible through the trees. Seth's rental car was already in the driveway. As Stephen parked, he saw his brother waiting on the front porch, a large, dusty cardboard box at his feet. Found this in the attic, Seth said, his voice even, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Gable from next door called me. Said she's been keeping an eye on the house. Saw some people coming and going over the past few weeks. Stephen's stomach tightened. Had someone spotted him during his covert operations? Seth opened the box. Inside were stacks of old photo albums, newspaper clippings, and financial ledgers. Look at this, he said, pulling out a thick folder labeled, The Curry Family Foundation, Unofficial Business. The folder contained dozens of stories, meticulously documented, anonymous donations to local churches, full scholarships for underprivileged students in the Charlotte area. Mortgages for struggling families mysteriously paid off, small businesses on the brink of failure suddenly saved by unnamed investors. The record spanned over 2 decades. What is this? Stephen asked, though he recognized some of the stories. He and his father had quietly managed these charitable endeavors for years, a secret they shared. That's what I thought you'd ask, Seth said, his eyes watching his brother carefully. But then I found this. He pulled out a photograph from 2011. It showed Stephen, then a rising star with the Warriors, at the opening of a newly renovated community center in Oakland. He was standing in the background, trying to be inconspicuous, while local officials cut the ribbon. Stephen remembered that day. He had anonymously funded the entire renovation. You've been doing this for years, haven't you? Seth asked, his voice soft. Helping people, quietly, without ever taking the credit. Stephen remained silent, his mind scrambling for an explanation. Mrs. Gable told me something else interesting, Seth continued, his gaze unwavering. She said she saw a man who looked a lot like you, wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap, talking to Pastor Roberts at the church down the street last week. And Jamal, at the memorabilia shop, mentioned a concerned family member asking about me. Seth, Wait. Seth held up a hand. There's more. He pulled a document out of the box. It was a copy of the wire transfer from Kowalski Development to the Northern California Youth Sports and Education Foundation. A $1 million donation. And at the bottom, in the memo line, were 2 words, for Seth. Stephen's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, brick by brick. I called Coach Kerr this morning, Seth said, his voice cracking slightly. He tried to play dumb, but I know his tells. I've seen him bluff his way through 1,000 press conferences. He was lying. Seth sat down on the porch steps, gesturing for Stephen to join him. I spent the entire flight here, putting the pieces together. The foundation that hired me was incorporated 2 weeks ago. Kowalski, a man known for his ruthlessness, suddenly forgives my debt and donates $1 million right after you're seen in town. The mayor of Sacramento calls me personally about a job that seems to have been tailor-made for me. Stephen sat down beside his brother, the weight of his deception settling upon him. But here's the thing that really gave it all away, Seth continued. He pulled out his phone and showed Stephen a photo. It was a crystal-clear security camera image from inside Kowalski's office, showing Stephen shaking hands with the developer. Kowalski sent this to me this morning. The message said, Your brother is a good man. Accept the gift he is offering you. Stephen dropped his head into his hands, the game finally over. I'm sorry, Seth. I wanted to help. To his complete surprise, Seth started to laugh. It was a deep, genuine laugh, a sound of release. Sorry, Steph? Do you know what I realized when I finally figured all this out? Stephen looked up, confused. I realized that half of Northern California was in on it. Jamal, Coach Flores, Pastor Roberts, the mayor, Draymond, even that old loan shark Kowalski. They all knew, and they all helped. They all wanted to see me succeed. Seth's eyes were glistening now. I've spent so long feeling like a failure, like I was invisible, that I couldn't see how many people actually cared about me. You're not mad? Mad? Seth paused, searching for the right word. I'm humbled, and a little embarrassed that my own stubborn pride made all of this necessary. A car pulled up to the curb, and Callie jumped out, followed by Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor Seth had been helping. We have a surprise for you, Callie announced, pulling both men by the hand towards the backyard. There, on the old basketball court, stood dozens of people. Seth's former teammates from Duke and the G League, kids he'd coached, neighbors he'd helped, community members whose lives he had touched in small but meaningful ways. They were holding a large banner that read, "Thank you, Coach Seth." Jamal Henderson stepped forward, a microphone in his hand. We all knew what Steph was doing, man, and we all wanted to be a part of it, because you've spent your whole life helping us, Seth. It was about time we returned the favor. One by one, people stepped forward to share their stories. The high school player Seth had mentored who had just received a college scholarship, the single mother whose car he had fixed for free, the youth team he had coached to their first ever championship. Stephen watched his brother's face transform, from shock to understanding, to a deep, profound joy. You did all this? Seth asked, looking at Stephen. No, Stephen replied, his voice thick with emotion. You did. I just created the assist. Pastor Robert stepped forward. Seth, this community center isn't just a job. It's our way of saying thank you. No more 3 jobs. No more choosing between rent and food. It's time for you to receive the blessings you've been giving out for so long. Seth wiped his eyes, then turned to Stephen. Why didn't you just tell me? Because you wouldn't have taken it. You had to believe you earned it. Stephen smiled. And you did earn it, Seth. Every single day for the past 30 years. Callie tugged at Seth's sleeve. There's one more surprise, Daddy. She led them to the old storage shed at the corner of the yard. Inside, carefully wrapped in protective cloth, was his 2015 championship ring. How did you? Seth started. Mr. Kowalski, Callie explained. He bought it back from the pawn shop and had it professionally cleaned. He said a champion's ring belongs with its champion. Seth held the ring in the palm of his hand, tears flowing freely now. I pawned this to pay for your braces. I know, Daddy, but Uncle Steph made sure I got them anyway. As the sun began to set over their childhood home, the crowd dispersed, leaving the 2 brothers alone on the court that had shaped them. A basketball lay between them, a silent testament to their shared journey. Remember what Dad used to say? Seth asked, picking up the ball. About how the best assists are the ones that no one sees, the ones that make your teammate look good? Stephen nodded. He said that's what family does. We set each other up for success without needing the credit. Took me a while to understand that, Seth admitted, his voice filled with a newfound humility. I was so focused on being the provider, the protector, that I forgot that it's okay to need help sometimes. We all need help, Seth, even me. Seth raised an eyebrow. You? What help do you need? Stephen smiled, a wide, genuine grin. I need my little brother back. The one who taught me that winning isn't about rings or trophies. It's about lifting others up. They sat in comfortable silence, the years of unspoken tension and rivalry melting away under the soft Carolina sky. Hey, Callie's voice called out from the porch. Are you 2 gonna play? Or just talk all night? Seth grinned, bouncing the ball. What do you say, Steph? One more game? For old time's sake? You're on, Stephen replied. But fair warning, I've gotten a little better since we were kids. We'll see about that, Seth laughed, dribbling towards the hoop, his movements fluid and confident once more. As they played, the familiar squeak of sneakers on pavement echoing in the twilight, Stephen realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was a new beginning. The community center in Sacramento would open next month, and Seth, a natural-born leader, would transform countless lives. But more importantly, two brothers had found their way back to each other, their bond stronger and deeper than ever before. The game ended with Seth hitting a perfect, high-arcing three-pointer, a shot as pure as any Steven had ever made. As they walked off the court, their arms slung around each other's shoulders, Steven's phone buzzed. It was a message from his publicist. The Sacramento story has gone national. ESPN wants an exclusive interview. Steven showed the message to Seth. What should I tell them? Seth thought for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his face. Tell them the truth. Tell them that sometimes the greatest victories happen off the court, and that family is always worth fighting for. As they headed inside their childhood home, neither brother noticed the young reporter from the Charlotte Observer watching from across the street. Her camera lens focused on the two figures, silhouetted against the warm light of the house where it all began. She had just captured the photo that would soon inspire millions.